All right, let's dive in. Today, we're unpacking one of the most famous buildings on the entire planet. Seriously, you've seen it everywhere. Postcards, movies. It's basically the global symbol for Russia. But behind that incredible facade is a wild story of war, myth, and just unbelievable survival. I mean, we all know this building, right? Those swirling onion domes, that explosion of color, it's just instantly recognizable. But what if I told you that pretty much everything we think we know about it, from its name to how it's even built, is just scratching the surface of a much, much deeper story? So what is this thing, really? Is it a single massive cathedral? Some kind of fantasy fortress standing guard over the Kremlin? Or is it something else? Maybe 9 completely separate churches, all hiding in plain sight? Well, the answer is way more interesting than you'd think. Okay, for starters, almost none of us call it by its real name. We all say St. Basil's, but its official name is the Cathedral of the Intercession of the Most Holy Theotokos on the Moat. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But that name, especially that little part, on the moat, is our first big clue about its dramatic beginnings. To really understand this building, we've got to go all the way back to the 16th century. And we have to talk about the man who ordered it built, a Tsar, known to history, of course, as Ivan the Terrible. See, this wasn't just built for Sunday service. Nope, this was a monument. It was a massive trophy carved out of stone to celebrate Ivan's victory in a brutal 8-year-long war that ended with the conquest of Kazan and Astrakhan. Almost every single detail of this building is tied to that military campaign. So construction kicks off in 1555, and the main part is finished in just 6 years, which is just mind-bogglingly fast for that time. At first, it was actually called Trinity Cathedral. It wasn't until 1588, almost 30 years later, that a 10th chapel was tacked on to house the grave of a really popular local holy man, Vasily, or as we'd say, Basil. And boom, that's how it got the nickname that stuck for centuries. You know, one of the most famous stories about the cathedral is that Ivan the Terrible was so blown away by its beauty that he had the architects blinded, just so they could never create anything like it again. It's a terrifying story, and it totally fits his reputation, right? But it's a complete myth. We actually have records showing one of the architects, Posnik Yakovlev, was busy working on other huge projects, like the Kazan Kremlin, for years after St. Basil's was finished. So the whole blinded architect's legend might be fake? But the building they created, well, that remains a huge architectural puzzle that has had experts scratching their heads for centuries. I think this quote from historian Dmitry Shvidkovsky just says it all. It is like no other Russian building. Seriously, there was nothing like it before, and there's really been nothing quite like it since. It just completely shattered 1,000 years of Byzantine tradition. It's a total one-of-a-kind. And here you can see the secret. Remember that question from the beginning? It's not one church, it's 9. The floor plan shows this perfectly symmetrical layout of 8 separate chapels, all built on one foundation and all organized around a taller, central 9th church. And each one of those chapels is a memorial. The big one in the middle, that's for the final bloody assault on Kazan. The others mark key moments from the war, like capturing a specific tower or crushing an enemy cavalry charge. It's basically a war diary written in brick and stone. So the big question is, where on earth did this completely new design come from? Well, historians are still arguing about it. Some see the DNA of old Russian wooden churches. Others point to wild sketches from the Italian Renaissance, or maybe some advanced building techniques from Germany. In the end, it probably wasn't just one thing, but this unique, lightning-in-a-bottle mix of ideas from all over the place. Now, you'd think a building this unique would be considered priceless, but its survival has been anything but guaranteed. In fact, it has come terrifyingly close to being completely destroyed multiple times. The history of this place is just a series of crazy close calls. It was torn apart by a huge fire in 1737. Then in 1812, Napoleon's army used it as a horse stable and then packed it with gunpowder to blow it sky high on their way out. But a sudden rainstorm supposedly put out the fuses. But the biggest threat, came from its own government in the 1930s, when it was officially scheduled to be demolished. It's really hard to imagine now, but for hundreds of years, the cathedral was just jammed into this chaotic, busy marketplace. You can see it in that painting on the left from 1802. The huge open red square we all recognize today, that's actually the result of a massive 19th century project that cleared out all that clutter and filled in the moat that used to run right next to the Kremlin wall. And that brings us to the story of how it survived the Soviets. So Stalin's city planner, Lazar Kaganovich, was redesigning Red Square for these huge military parades, and, well, the cathedral was in the way. Legend has it, he presented a model to Stalin that had a little removable cathedral. He lifts it off the board to show the new plan, and Stalin just looks at him and says, "Lazar, put it back." And that was it. But it didn't get away completely unharmed. During the Soviet Union's big anti-religion campaigns, the building was seized from the Orthodox Church. Then, in 1928, it was completely secularized and turned into a state museum. It wasn't until 1997, long after the fall of the Soviet Union, that religious services finally started up again. So, it's a war memorial, it's an architectural marvel, and it's a survivor. But for centuries, its most important role was something else entirely. It was the symbolic and spiritual heart of Moscow. Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. There's this concept called the allegory of Jerusalem. For hundreds of years, the cathedral wasn't just a church. In a symbolic way, it was Jerusalem. It literally played the role of the holy city in Moscow's most important religious festival, the Palm Sunday Parade, where the Tsar himself would lead a donkey carrying the patriarch, reenacting Christ's entry into Jerusalem. And this print from the 17th century shows you exactly that moment. You can see this massive procession moving across Red Square, heading straight for the cathedral, their symbolic temple. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was the main political and religious event of the whole year, and it reinforced the power of both the church and the Tsar. And here's the key, its location. By building it outside the Kremlin walls, right in the middle of the public market, Ivan the Terrible was making a huge political statement. This was the main church for the common folk, a direct, personal symbol from the Tsar to his people, completely bypassing all the nobles and elites inside the Kremlin. And that's really the cathedral's ultimate journey. It began its life as a monument to a specific, bloody military conquest, an assertion of one Tsar's power. But over more than 450 years, it's just absorbed so much history, fires, invasions, revolutions, close calls, that it's transformed into something so much bigger, an enduring symbol of a nation's identity and its incredible resilience. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. When a building witnesses the rise and fall of entire empires, when it becomes the backdrop for a nation's greatest triumphs and its worst tragedies, does it stop being just a thing made of stone and brick? Does it actually become a living character in that nation's story?